Okay, hello everyone. So as always, our learning is dedicated to the safe and immediate return of all of our hostages and the healing, refuah shlema of everyone who needs it, particularly our soldiers, refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf, and to the success of Tzahal in everything that they do, and to Besorot Tovot in general. Okay, so we are in the second of our classes. Last week we really did like kind of a larger topic where we talked about graves and cemeteries with our connection to Elul and going to the cemetery. Today's topic is definitely much more directly connected to the Yamim Noraim, and that's the story of shofar, right? When we think of shofar, right, shofar is the only mitzvah aseh of Rosh Hashanah. I actually looked online today because I was just curious, what sites say about that. And, they say, oh, there are so many different mitzvot, like eating apple and honey, right? We don't have mitzvot aseh of Rosh Hashanah. Even the davening, right, is davening. It's davening like every day. The fact that it's longer and special is not a special mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah. The only mitzvah aseh we have of Rosh Hashanah is shofar. And so we associate shofar with Rosh Hashanah, perhaps also somewhat with Yom Kippur. Um, we could even go like one step, take it one step deeper and say we talk about shofar or shofarot as part of our Musaf on Rosh Hashanah and the Psukim with shofar. But really, shofar has many, many more associations than just Rosh Hashanah. It's used for many, many different things, even today. And so that's really the direction that I'm going to go in today, which is to talk about shofar, the range of meanings of shofar, how it's used in Tanakh, in rabbinic literature, and even today. Right? The picture, this great picture, I don't know if anybody here recognizes it offhand. This is the Abu Hav Shul in Sfat. Abu Hav is probably the most beautiful shul in Sfat. All kinds of fantastic decorations all over. But I chose it because you have this shofar, right? Shofar tied up on one of the poles of the bima. And I actually asked somebody I know who guides in Spot. I said, is there some special significance? No, it's just waiting there for Rosh Hashanah. So, but it is a great picture, right? And of course, our title, B'shofar Gadol Yitaka, we're going to come to that at the end. We hear that phrase in the Netana Tokef, but it's also a pasuk that comes from Yeshayahu. Okay, we'll come back to that. But first, really, when we think of shofar, we think of it as kind of a uniquely Jewish instrument, and it is in its name. But in reality, it is not unique to us at all. And we know that ancient peoples in the ancient Near East, probably in other places also, but we're going to focus on the ancient Near East, use all different kinds of things, particularly animal horns, as instruments, and for some of the same reasons that we're going to see that we use shofar for, whether it's for announcements, for assembly, for warfare, for prayer, right? So here, there was an exhibit in the Bible Lands about 15 years ago about shofar, like throughout the ancient Near East, right? If you know the Bible Lands Museum, you know that they always try to connect things across cultures. And so there was an accompanying text explaining, different places where ancient Near Eastern texts talk about shofar. They don't call it a shofar, okay? But it clearly is, right? And we'll see that in the pictures in a moment. But I brought you these two texts here as two examples. Okay. The first one is something that we're going to see. Shofar is used as a way to say, hey, everybody, listen up, right? This is a way to make announcements, right? Ancient times. How do you get everybody's attention? A seal with the name of Urshel, the merchant, has been lost. In accordance with the decision of the city assembly, the bailiff blew the horn in the streets, right? We want to get everybody out so we could say, did you find the seal, right? Around the same time, we have a poem, a Sumerian poem that references the shofar in the temple, right? In part of a religious ritual. While the sacred song, the harmonious song, is performed before the goddess, small copper ringers praise the temple. The chief musician plays the ibex horn before her. Okay, we'll talk in a minute about what shofarot are made of, but just take a look at these pictures, which I think are great, because if you didn't know what they were, you would say, oh, of course, these are, Jewish scenes. Right? So here you have this figure blowing the shofar. This is a figure from northern Syria from about 1,000 before the Common Era, meaning about the time of David HaMelech. What's really great about this one, and this they pointed out from the Bible lands, and I'll show it to you here, is that not only do you have the shofar, right? We see the shofar, but you also have, this guy has some kind of a listening device, right? He's listening on the telephone, whatever it is, right? It's a listening device here, meaning they suggest that just as the figure is calling out to the gods, he's also getting a response from the gods, right? So that I think is just great. And the other relief, this is a figure, this is a relief. This is also from northern Syria, Carchemish, 8th century before the Common Era, meaning around the time Chizkiyahu, a little bit earlier, right? And you can see there's a whole procession of music makers, but this guy is clearly blowing the shofar. Okay, so very nice. And it shows us that the shofar is not unique to us. It may have taken on special meaning, but it's not unique to us. What do you make a shofar out of? Okay, made out of a hollowed out animal horn. Okay, it has to be a horn. It can't be antlers, right? It's got to be something that you take out the cartilage inside and it's hollow. Um, Ours are made from kosher animals. You can b'di'evit make it from a non-kosher animal, but really we only make it from kosher animals, ideally from a ram, right? A male goat, or a sheep, or if you know the Yemenite curved shofarot from something called a kudu. Okay? The one thing that's a no-no in terms of kosher animals, we don't want to make it out of a car, excuse me. We don't want to make it out of a cow, right? Why not? Because as the Gemara says, lo naaseh kategor sanegor. When we blow with the shofar, one of the things we're doing is we're saying, Hashem, please forgive us. The cow is not a defense attorney, but is a prosecutor, because the cow is a stand-in for the Egel HaZahav, right? Well, we don't want to say to God, oh, please have mercy on us, while displaying our greatest sin. Even though the Gemara has conversations and discussions, and there is an opinion that you can have a shofar made out of a cow. And in fact, we have even very interesting Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says that shofar actually is a notricon. It's an abbreviation of shor par, right? An ox and a cow. Take that as you will. Today, we do not make shofarot out of cows, but we do make them out of all kinds of interesting animals. If you've ever gone to the Biblical Museum of Natural History, Natan Slifkin's museum outside of Beit Shemesh, we'll show you all kinds of crazy and kosher shofarot. Okay, now, we're going to see all kinds of meanings for the shofar, but in the context of Elul and Rosh Hashanah, the shofar takes on an additional meaning, and this is probably the most famous writing that we have about the shofar, and that's the Rambam. And the Rambam in Hilchot Tshuva says that even though we have to blow the shofar because the Torah says so, that doesn't mean that there isn't something deeper going on, right? Afal pisha tkiyat shofar b'Rosh Hashanah gzerat hakatuv, right? It's something that you have to do, whether there's a reason or not. You have to do it. Remesh yesh bo, it has an allusion, a hint, a hidden meaning. Klomar, uru yishenim mishnatchem v'nirdamim hakitzu mitardematchem v'chapsu b'maasechem v'chizru b'tshuva v'zichru borechem. Wake up, you sleeping ones, from your sleep, and you who slumber arise. Inspect your deeds, repent, remember your Creator. And anyone who has been going to shul this month or even lives near a shul, right? It really is an alarm clock. You're hearing it. It's saying, wake up, right? This year, saying Kaddish, as a lot of you know. And so I really have been going to shul every morning, and it's very different to hear shofar every day in Elul than just here for the first time on Rosh Hashanah. And he goes on. אלו השוכחים את האמת בהבלי הזמן, ושוגים כל שנתם בהבל וריק, אשר לא יועיל ולא יציל, right? Those who forget the truth in the vanities of time and throughout the entire year devote their energies to vanity and emptiness, which will not benefit or save. Look to your souls. Okay? הביטו לנפשותיכם, והיטיבו דרככם ומעליכם, ויעזוב כל אחד מכם דרכו הרעה ומחשבתו אשר לא טובה, right? Leave your bad ways and improve yourselves. And that's the Rambam saying the shofar is not just an ancient instrument. It has a special meaning. It's calling out to us and telling us to do tshuva. Now, interesting, we have, the Torah talks about two things, right? And it's not so clear in the text that a shofar is what you use on Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara makes it very clear, right? The Mishnah of the Gemara. But in the text, what does it say? ובחודש השביעי, we have a few places, I brought you the one in במדבר, ובחודש השביעי באחד לחודש מקרא קודש יהיה לכם, כל מלאכת עבודה לא תעשו, fine, don't do work, we all know that. יום תרועה יהיה לכם, right? This is the day we're of blowing, right? What does that mean, right? What does that mean, the day of blowing, the day of the shofar? It's not really a shofar, it's a truah, right? It's a sound that we make. And it can be confusing because earlier in Sefer Bamidbar, we have a whole segment that talks about making a different kind of instrument, and that's the chatzotzra. Okay, chatzotzra, we usually translate it as a trumpet. כסף, מקשה תעשה אותם, מקשה תעשה אותם, והיו לך למקרא העדה למסע את המחנות, right? We have these two silver trumpets, and we use them for, as we'll see, many of the things we use the shofar for, right? Gathering the people together before you go out to war, when you're announcing holidays, right? So is it a shofar? Is it a trumpet? Is it a chatzotzra? And in case you want to understand the differences between them, okay, we have a nice classic shofar on Rosh Hashanah card here. We all know what a shofar looks like, but a chatzotzra, trumpet, right? Don't think of a trumpet like today, although it's not that different, but we have amazing, a picture of the chatzotzrot in the same place where we have a picture of menorah, and that, of course, is the Arch of Titus, where you see that the Roman soldiers are carrying not just the Aron and the menorah and their standards, but they're also carrying two trumpets. Okay. Now, like we said, the Mishnah and the Gemara explain very clearly that what we blow on Rosh Hashanah is not the chatzotzra, but it is the trumpet. Sorry, it's not the chatzotzra, but it is the shofar. But what's interesting is the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah talks about how you do have the chatzotzra. It's not fulfill the mitzvah, but it kind of is for decoration, right? It makes it more impressive. It makes it more beautiful. And that's the Mishnah that you have here in Rosh Hashanah. The shofar that was used on Rosh Hashanah in the temple was made from the straight horn of an ibex, and its mouth was plated with gold, right? Interesting. Today, we don't normally do that. We leave the shofar unadorned. And here they continue and they do something else that we totally don't do. And there were two trumpets, one on each of two sides of the person sounding the shofar. The shofar would sound a long blast. The trumpets would sound a short blast because the mitzvah of the day is with the shofar, right? Fascinating that this is what the Mishnah says, because I can't imagine any rabbi today or any congregation today saying, oh, great, let's have another sound at the same time as the shofar. We'd say, oh, but you have to hear the shofar. It has to be, without any sound, and nobody can make any noise, right? But in the mikdash, you really did have both of them, and it's more for beauty, for luxury, for all the things that we associate with the mikdash. Okay, besides Rosh Hashanah, where do we hear about the shofar? And if I was to do this, as an interactive class, I'm sure you guys would all be thinking of many, many possibilities. Okay. But we'll start out with the very first place where we hear about the shofar before Rosh Hashanah. And that, of course, is Ma'amad Har Sinai, Matan Torah, right? And the feeling we get from here, right, of the shofar is that it's very awesome, not awesome as in awesome, but awesome, right? Full of awe, full of fear. ויהי ביום השלישי בהיות הבוקר, ויהי קולות וברקים וענן כבד על ההר, וקול שופר חזק מאוד. And I think it's very difficult for us to imagine this scene. But maybe the closest, at least here in Israel, that we can imagine such a scene is what we had a few months ago when we had, all the warnings of the missiles coming from Iran, right? There's a lot of action in the sky. It's very foreboding. It's very frightening, right? And the third day is morning dawn. There was thunder and lightning and a dense cloud upon the mountain and a very loud blast of the shofar. And all the people who were in the camp trembled. And here you have something that we see in the Machzor, right? We have in our Machuyot, Zichronot, Shofarot, Machuyot and Shofarot kind of parallel each other because Malchiyot is all about crowning God in the world, making God our king and our ruler, and Shofarot is partly about showing how that happens. How do you crown a king? We're going to come back to that. The shofar is used for crowning a king, and here that's what's going on. It's very frightening, but it shows Am Yisrael, here is Hashem's presence, right? Because God can't show himself, but by having this very loud noise and this pyrotechnics in the sky, this is Hashem's presence. The picture, by the way, in case you're wondering, is the picture of a mountain in the Sinai Desert where St. Catherine's Monastery is, and which, according to some scholars, is the mountain that is Har Sinai. Not everybody agrees, but it is a great picture, so that's why I brought it. Okay, so that's the first time that we hear about the shofar in the Torah. The second time is not at all connected to Rosh Hashanah, but it is connected to a different occasion that comes not very often, and that's the Yovel, right? And we know that you count 7 years, right? Every seventh year is a Shemitah. You count 7 Shemitas, and after the 7th Shemitah, after year 49, year 50 is the Yovel. Okay, what's special about the Yovel? The Yovel is special that everything kind of gets erased, right? And goes back to the way it was, meaning if you sold land, it comes back to you, to the original owner. But perhaps most significant, certainly most significant on a human level, is that in the Yovel, Eved Ivri, all Jewish slaves go free, right? It doesn't matter, you served out your 7 years, you didn't serve out your 7 years, all slaves go free. Eved Ivri, not Eved Kanani, okay? And that's what's emphasized here in Sefer Vayikra. And what do you do to proclaim this special year of the Yovel? You blow the shofar. Right? והעברת שופר תרועה בחודש השביעי ועשור לחודש ביום הכיפורים. תעבירו שופר בכל ארצכם. Right? Sound the shofar in the 7th month on the 10th day on Yom Kippur throughout the land. וקידשתם את שנת ה-50 שנה וקראתם דרור בארץ לכל יושביה. יובל היא תהיה לכם ושבתם איש על אחוזתו ואיש על משפחתו תשובו. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants. Okay? Dror, as in, here it says release, often it's translated as freedom, okay? It's a jubilee. Each of you shall return to your holding and your family, right? Everything goes back to the beginning. So what is the shofar blowing? What's it symbolizing? Okay? It's symbolizing, like we said, things going back to the beginning, liberty, right? Slaves going free. The Sforno, right? Very, very nice Perush says, why do you blow the shofar? He says, Tru'a l'simchat ha'chirut. You're basically saying, hooray, right? How wonderful. You're blowing the shofar in celebration of your freedom. Now, besides the Torah, right, the other famous place where this pasuk is utilized, of course, is on the bell that got to be known as the Liberty Bell. Okay, in Philadelphia. If you have been to Philadelphia, you may have seen it. It has not been rung in at least 100 years, probably more than that. Okay, it's actually made before the Revolutionary War. It's made in 1751, and it's a very practical thing. It's not a Liberty Bell. It's the State House bell, and it's in the State House ringing for many of the reasons that we're going to see shofar is used for. It's meant to be used for assembly, It's meant to call all the lawmakers when they need to come to the state house. It's meant to call the townspeople to hear news. When important people die, like Benjamin Franklin or George Washington, they ring the bell, right? But they decide to put this inscription on it. Okay, not so clear why, the original reason, but eventually in the 19th century, the inscription becomes very important because people think about this bell and use it as a symbol of uh, trying to abolish slavery, right? The abolitionists, of women's suffrage, right? Different kinds of civil rights. And it gets this new name, the Liberty Bell, right? And we have an Israeli connection because, as people who live here or visit here know, we have our own copy of the Liberty Bell in Liberty Bell Park in Gan HaPa'amon. It was meant to be in the Knesset. That's a whole story in and of itself. We won't go into that. Okay. Um, when else do we use the shofar? So, like we saw with the ancient Near Eastern horns, the shofar is also used as a rallying cry for war. Okay, we have a number of different sources that talk about this. In Shoftim, in the beginning of Sefer Shoftim, the judge Ehud ben Gera calls the shofar in order to get everybody to come into battle. Right, the shofar is meant to strike fear into the hearts of the enemies, right? Look at the pasuk from Amos on the bottom here. Oh, I didn't read the Ehud ben Gera. Sorry, that's the second to last one here. When he got there, he had the shofar sounded through the hill country of Ephraim, and all the Israelites descended with him from the hill country, and he took the lead, right? So this is this kind of a war cry to come together, but it's also meant to terrify the enemy, and that's what you have in Amos. Imi taka shofar ba'ir ba'am lo yecharadu. When a shofar is sounded in a town, do the people not take alarm? It's very frightening. Okay, but probably the most famous shofar in war is what I have pictures of here. We'll explain the pictures in a minute, and that's in Sefer Yoshua. And there, it's used in kind of a different way. It's not for gathering the people. It's maybe like psychological warfare a little bit, but mostly it's not to strike fear. It's a divine signal to make the walls of Jericho fall down, right? And if we remember the story, they go day after day after day, seven priests carrying seven shofarot preceding the ark. They do one circuit of the city. The priests blow the shofar. They go home. Do it again, go home. Again, go home. People in Jericho are probably going crazy. On the seventh day, march around the city seven times with the priest blowing the shofar. And when a long blast is sounded on the shofar, as soon as you hear the sound of the shofar, all the troops shall give a mighty shout. Thereupon the city wall will collapse and the troops shall advance, every man straight ahead. So it's meant to be kind of this divine signal that Hashem is fighting for them, which we have in Yericho, we don't really have in other places. I could not resist, if we're talking about Yericho, to bring you two different things. First, we have this great medieval manuscript that's showing Yericho, right? Yericho, the pasuk says, is sgura umisugeret, right? Closed and enclosed. So this illustrated manuscript shows Jericho in the middle with not one but seven walls all around it. Right? It's definitely closed and enclosed. So I don't know if that's what it looked like. Probably not, but it is a great picture. Okay, the one on the bottom is really very odd. This is, as you can see, you have the Leviim, the Kohanim carrying the Aron, blowing the shofar, but this is not a Jewish text. Okay. This is a plate, a very beautiful metal plate. It's about 1,000 years old, 9th, 10th century, Central Asia, a Christian group, Nestorian Christians, and the plate is a whole scene of the story of Yericho. This is just one detail. It has Rachav in the walls of the city. It has the people running away. It has everything in this one plate. And for historians, it's actually fascinating because it shows you what did the armor and the fortresses of that time look like. Why did they choose Yoshua? Your guess is as good as mine. But it was a great illustration, and since we don't actually have any photographs from the story, I thought this would be good. Okay, another place where we hear about, oh, just one more thing, okay? And this again brings us back. I don't know why I'm mentioning this so many times, the Iran war, but when Thursday night, right? Anyone who was living in Israel or was visiting in Israel at the time remembers this very well, right? Thursday night in June, everyone in the whole country gets this crazy alert on their phones, 3 a.m., we're going to attack, right? We're attacking in Iran, and then everybody's kind of waiting what's going to be. So at 6 in the morning, we went to shul. I went to shul with my husband, and you sort of like you're expecting somebody's going to say something. And the Rav of our community, Rav Weitman, was there, and I knew he was going to say something after shul because how could you not? So he got up and he said, "This is a historic moment, and we need to daven." And we said a parak of Tehillim, and then he said, "I'm going to blow the shofar because that's what you do in times of war." And he did, and he blew the shofar, and it was a very powerful moment. So, we think it's something ancient. It has strength today as well. Okay, another place where we have shofar in warfare, this is really different than what we saw before. It's not a divine sign. It's not for assembly. It's kind of a shock tactic. Okay? And that's, of course, the story of Gidon. Okay? Where Gideon goes out against the very, very large Midianite army. He takes this very small, elite force. We have the great story where he tells them, drink from the brook, from the river Harod, the picture that you have here. And he picked only the ones who lay down and kind of lapped the water into their mouths instead, not the ones who kneeled, right? In the end, he comes with only 300 men, comes to the Midianim in the middle of the night, okay, when everybody's sleeping, there's just a few guards, and he tells his 300 men, he says, "Watch me and do the same. Mimeni tiru v'kein ta'asu." And what he does is he has each of them take a jug, okay, a torch, and a shofar. And they take the torch, it's covered by the jug with enough air that the fire is still burning, but so that nobody can see that there's fire. And he says, when they get to the edge of the camp, okay, blow your shofar. I didn't bring you the whole text. Blow your shofar, break your jug, and then there'll be torchlight everywhere. What's the idea? It's terrifying, right? They're going to surround the camp. It's all quiet, everything's peaceful, everything's nice, and suddenly noise, fire, light, horns, what's going on? And the desired effect happens, right? The Midianim are completely in panic, in shock. They kill each other, and Gidon has them on the run. Right now, a person who was very attached to this story is the fellow here on the right, who was a great friend of Israel. He was such a good friend that he was known as the Yedid, the friend. He was a very strange man, but he also was a very good man to us. And this is a fellow named Ord Wingate. Ord Wingate was a British officer. He was sent to Palestine in 1936 in order to help to put down the Arab revolt. He is very connected to the Zionist cause. He very much believes in it. He creates something called special night squads, where he goes out and he really teaches the Haganah. Like, it's a really elite unit, and they learn many things from him. Um, and they go out on raids against Arab towns. But one of his sources of inspiration is Tanakh. And he says, you have your book of battle tactics, it's all there. And he particularly loves the story of Gideon, small elite force going out at night, guerrilla tactics, right? All kinds of interesting lessons that he learns from Tanakh. Okay, moving in a different direction. Okay, we saw this with Ma'amad Har Sinai, okay, with the crowning of God as our king. But lahavdil, right? We also use the shofar to crown earthly kings. Now, interestingly, I know this about the story of Shlomo HaMelech, and then I was curious, like, is it with other kings? Do we have it with Shaul? Do we have it with David, right? We have coronation scenes for them, or with the other later kings. As far as I could find, We only have it with Shlomo HaMelech, and I don't have a good answer for that. Anybody who wants to give an answer, I'm happy to hear. But very clearly, right, when David is old and there's Adoniah as a pretender to the throne, but Sheva and Natan Navi come to him and say, no, 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 you promised that Shlomo would be the king after you. And he says, okay, take him down to the Gihon spring. It's the picture that you have here, right? And anoint him with oil, and he's going to be the next king. And what do they do? The priest Tzadok and the prophet Natan and Benaiah ben Yoyada went with the kreti and the pleti. They had Shlomo ride on King David's mule, and they led him to the Gihon. To Gihon, the priest Tzadok took the shofar of oil from the tent, the horn of oil, really, and anointed Solomon. And they sounded the shofar, and all the people shouted, "Long live King Solomon." By the way, in the story, if you keep on reading, Adoniah, who is hoping that he is going to be the next king, and he has already had himself crowned by his supporters, they're having their party, and suddenly they say, "Ooh, do we hear a shofar? Is that a shofar we hear?" And they understand that things are not going to be going well for them. Okay, so you have this as a coronation story. Now, lest you say, okay, that was the olden times, but not anymore. Today, when Israel appoints a president, right, a nasi, not a melech, not a king, but the nasi, but part of the ceremony of appointing a new president for Israel is shofar blowing, right? And this is a still from a video of the ceremony when our latest president, our current president, Yitzhak Herzog, was appointed. As you can see from the masks, this was at the height of Corona. It was in 2021. But after he is called up to the podium and he gives a speech and he gets blessed and he takes the oath of office, etc., etc., then they blow the shofar and they say, Yechi Nasi Amidina, right? Long live the president. So modern Israel is very eclectic in the customs and the ideas that it likes to take from Jewish history, from Tanakh, from different places. So this is one of them. So they really do blow the shofar. Okay. As we saw at the beginning, the shofar, despite all its other uses, is ultimately it's a musical instrument, right? It's one of a range of many, many different types of instruments, and we have them in Tehillim, right? Chatzotzrot v'kol shofar, with trumpets and a blast of the shofar, raise a shout before Hashem, and of course the very last parak in Tehillim, which is all about, all of these different kinds of instruments that are being used to praise Hashem, right? I brought you just one little piece, but read the whole thing. That'll make it more interesting, right? Hallelujah, hallelujah, el bekocho, hallelujah b'kiyazo, hallelujah b'gvurotav, hallelujah karov golo, hallelujah b'teka shofar, hallelujah b'nevel b'kinor, right? Shofar, harp, lyre, hallelujah b'tof umachol, right? With a drum or maybe a cymbal and dance. Hallelu b'minim v'ugav, other stringed instruments, right? Hallelu b'tziltzlei shama, hallelu b'tziltzlei truah, different kinds of shouts. Kol haneshama ta'alel ya, hallelujah. Now, interesting, right? There are many, many different kinds of instruments, and this is an attempt to portray all of them in the Tunisian synagogue in Akko, which is full of mosaics. But really, many of these are conjecture, and certainly their sound is conjecture, right? Okay, so the Kinor and the Nevo, we have some images of them on coins. Chatzotzra, we said we have the image on the Arch of Titus, but we don't know what they sounded like. We don't know really 100% what they look like. The one that we're most sure about is the shofar, because we're still using the shofar today. And the shofar is still used occasionally for music, and you can make different kinds of sounds with it. So here you have this whole assembly of shofar blowers. I don't know what the occasion was, but it's even used in, modern different kinds of music. Putting in a shofar kind of gives it a little kind of a quirky ethnic twist. And certainly shofarot are used today. If you hang out around the old city, Jewish quarter or the Kotel on a Monday or a Thursday, you will hear plenty of shofarot because this has become one of the things that you do to celebrate a bar mitzvah. So this is bringing us to another aspect of the shofar, and that's the idea of announcements, right? And that's what we saw with the ancient Near East and with the Liberty Bell in a time before loudspeakers and certainly in a time before Twitter and social media. How do you get your message out? You have to make a loud noise so that everybody hears you, and then you can get your message out to the world, right? And this is true for the shofar. It's true for the chatzotzra as well. So just to give us a couple of examples here, right? Another pasuk in Tehillim, "Ik'u b'chodesh shofar Bakesel Yom Chagenu, blow the shofar on the new moon, on the full moon for our feast day. Right? The Gemara says that this is not referring only to Rosh Chodesh, which it seems to refer to in Tehillim, but it's referring specifically to Rosh Hashanah. It says, what's the Chag, Yom Chagenu, where you have a kese, you have something covered, where you have the moon is covered up. That's the only holiday we have like that is Rosh Hashanah, right? All the other holidays are in the middle of the month or the 10th of the month. We have a full moon. Rosh Hashanah, the moon is covered up. So, but it's the idea is the same. You blow the shofar to announce, today is a special day. Today is a holy day. Today is a day where this boy is going to be bar mitzvah. It's also used for maybe somewhat more mundane announcements. So the Gemara has various references to blowing a shofar, and one of them is for psak, is for telling people what is the halachic ruling of the court, right? So we have this Gemara in Avodah Zarah where there's a disagreement between Rava and Rav Huna. Shofarot went out from the court of Rava and he prohibited, right? There was a question about fish. Is it kosher? Is it not kosher? He prohibited the fish. Shofarot went out from the court of Rav Huna bar Chinna, and he permitted the fish, right? You have dueling shofarot to symbolize the dueling psak, the dueling halachic differences of opinion. The shofar is also used to announce not such positive things. Okay, it's a warning for one thing, right? It's a warning. Could be a warning that the enemy is coming. It could be a warning of sentries. Okay, we have a pasuk in Nehemiah that talks about how the people who are building the wall around Jerusalem, right? We have this very famous pasuk that with one hand they have the trowel that they're fixing the wall with, and the other hand they have their weapon. And it also says that there are sentries with shofarot who blow the shofar if the enemy is coming. In a more picturesque way, you have the pasuk in Yirmiyahu. Ha'ezu b'nei Binyamin mikerev Yerushalayim, right? Flee for refuge, the people of Binyamin from the midst of Jerusalem. Ubitkoa tik'u shofar, right? Blow the shofar into kol, which of course sounds much better in Hebrew because you have an alliteration. Ubitkoa tik'u shofar, right? Beit HaKerem su'u mas'et, and set up a signal, a fire signal at Beit HaKerem. These are all ways to say bad stuff is coming. Ra'anish kefa mitzafon v'shever gadol. Right? Another type of difficult announcement. This is not an announcement, to warn people to flee, but rather it's to inform them that times are bad. Okay? Gemara and Tanit talks about, if you have a drought and the drought keeps on going, we have a series of fast days. If it still doesn't rain, it still doesn't rain, it still doesn't rain. So you have 7 fast days that you have as like the next level after the first early fast days. How are these 7 fast days more stringent than the first ones? The difference is that on these days, they sound the alarm and they lock the stores. Okay, with what did they sound the alarm? The Gemara says matri'im. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda said with the shofar, and Rashi explains tokim bashofarot kedei sheyachniu libam lekol hashofar v'yiyu nirta'im mechatatam. We blow the shofar so that their hearts will submit from the call of the shofar, and they will get away from their sins. They'll leave their sins behind. Okay, so we have it as a call to tshuva, like what we were talking about in our time today in Elul, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur. We also have the shofar when the rabbis decide that they are putting someone in cherem, right, in a ban. So Rab Tachlifa Bar Avimi and the Gemara Moed Katan said a shofar at the time of the ostracism of the cherem makes it binding, and a shofar releases it. And again, this is more like an announcement thing. Everybody should know this person has been put into nidui, has been put into cherem. Right? And finally, and this is what we said with the Liberty Bell, right? Interesting if one knew of the other, you have the shofar announcing that someone has died. Okay, no signs that are going up all over, right? None of the modaot evel, but rather Rav Nuna happened to come to Darumata. He heard the sound of a shofar announcing that a person had died in the town. Okay, so all these kinds of announcements, whether it's war or drought or cherem or death, none of these are particularly positive, but important that people need to know. Okay, so one final kind of announcement, and this is a more mundane, but definitely a very important one, and that's the beginning of Shabbat, right? Think about it. In the time, before you have clocks, most people don't have clocks. Most people tell time by sunrise and sunset. But if it's a cloudy day, okay, so on a normal day, big deal. You'll eat your dinner, 20 minutes later. But for Shabbos, you need to know what time it is. You need to know when the sun is going to set. And so we have this famous Gemara in Shabbat that talks about how the Levi'im would go up onto the southwestern corner of Har HaBayit, and they would blow on the shofar. They sound six blasts on Shabbat Eve, the first in order to stop people from working the fields, the second to stop those who are working in the city and to close the stores, the third is to inform them to light the Shabbat lights. And he pauses after the third for the length of time it takes to fry a small fish or stick bread to the sides of the oven. And he sounds Tekiah, Truah, Tekiah, and he accepts Shabbat, right? So this is actually a fascinating thing because we have this Gemara, but we also have physical archaeological evidence that this really happened. When the excavations were done, the southern wall excavations, the excavations at the foot of Har HaBayit, at that southwestern corner, a stone was discovered, carved, really, it was clearly a corner. You could see it today. But what was really fascinating about it is that on it was writing. Okay, and the writing said, very nice, clear Hebrew letters, Lebeit Hatkiah, Lehav, we don't know, it's cut off. Beit Hatkiah, the place of the shofar blowing. That's what's going on here. Okay, so we have this really beautiful evidence that backs up the Gemara telling us that really they did do this. It also tells us that the world was a much quieter place, which I think is fascinating, right? If you're blowing the shofar on the roof of Har HaBayit, it can be heard out in the fields, which are pretty far out because there are no fields right next to Jerusalem. Okay? Now this has been taken into modern times with some communities have a siren before Shabbat, right? Jerusalem has it, Lahavdil Borough Park has it, right? Lots of different places have a siren that tells you Shabbat is coming in. And this picture, I can't tell you 100%. It's a picture that I found without a caption on Wikipedia. But the likelihood is that's what's going on here. This guy blowing on his porch. Why would he be blowing on his porch? It's not in Shul. It's not Rosh Hashanah. It's probably this, Erev Shabbos blowing the shofar, which is what they did before there were sirens, right? Blowing the shofar and saying Shabbat is coming in. You better get moving and get yourself ready. Okay, a very different kind of shofar blast. This is using the laws of shofar in the Mikdash and in the rest of Israel. This is being used by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to ascribe authority to Yavne. Okay, so let's just understand what's going on here, right? Even though the Torah says blow the shofar, On Rosh Hashanah, Chazal say if Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, we don't blow the shofar. We have zichron truah. We remember, but we don't do it. Okay, and that's what we do today. However, in the Beit HaMikdash, shofar was blown on Shabbat. Same thing, by the way, with lulav. Today, lulav, if the first day of Sukkot is Shabbat, we don't take the lulav. But in the Beit HaMikdash, they took the lulav even on Shabbat. Okay, fine, very understandable. But then what happens? The Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai survives, asks the Romans for Yavne, right? Yavne, nice little town not far from Ashdod, between Ashdod and Yafo, moves the Sanhedrin there, and he wants to give the Sanhedrin authority. Okay. Now, that's very, very difficult to do, right? We all say, oh, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is so important, he saved Judaism. We assume that that was like a given. No. Why would you give authority to the Sanhedrin if it's not sitting on Har HaBayit, if it's not connected to the Beit HaMikdash? You don't, the whole system has changed. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai says, yes, of course we want the Beit HaMikdash to be rebuilt, but this is a test case. We are going to ascribe importance to the place of the Sanhedrin, so much importance that we're going to blow the shofar on Shabbat in Yavne, because the Sanhedrin's authority moves outside of the Beit HaMikdash now that the Beit HaMikdash has been destroyed. So we have the Mishnah, right? Very simple. Halacha, after the temple was destroyed, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted the people should sound the shofar on Shabbat in every place where there is a court. By the way, we don't do this anymore. We don't have a Sanhedrin, but okay. He also instituted the same thing with lulav. But then we have this great story in Rosh Hashanah, right? In the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, where once Rosh Hashanah occurred on Shabbat, all the cities gathered at the great Sanhedrin in Yavne. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said to the sons of Betera, the Bnei Betera, very important rabbis, let us sound the shofar. They said to him, let us discuss, right? He says, nitka, and they say, nidon, let's talk about it. He said to them, let us sound it, and afterwards let us discuss. Okay? After they sounded, the sons of Betera said to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, let us discuss. He said, shofar has already been heard in Yavne, right? And one does not refute a ruling after an action, right? Karen Nishma B'Yavne, that's it. We did it. We've established the status quo. And now, and he really outsmarted the Bnei Betera, we've established the status quo and the Sanhedrin's authority through this blowing of the shofar. So it's really a great story. What's the picture? Picture is an excavation that was done in the town of Yavne from the time of the Sanhedrin. It was a couple of years ago. They found this very big, impressive building, a winery, and all kinds of other stuff. Okay, moving on, because we don't have so much time. We have a few more important things. Hey, shofar joins the limited pantheon of Jewish symbols. Okay, first in synagogues. So the classic, the Jewish symbol with a capital, T, is the menorah. Menorah, always you find a menorah, Jewish symbol, no question. Okay, but we have a few other things that come to be signifiers of Judaism, usually alongside the menorah, not by themselves. Okay, and one of those is the shofar. So here in the Shalom Yisrael synagogue in Yericho, this is a copy, but the real thing is there too. You have a menorah, you have a shofar on the right, and you have a lulav, arba minim, also one of the symbols of something Jewish. In the much fancier mosaic in Hamat Tveria, okay, you have not one but two menorahs flanking the Aron. You have symbols from the Beit HaMikdash, the machtot for the Ketoret, but again, you have much more nicely made shofar and lulav on either side of the menorah. Okay, we also have shofarot on graves. Okay, also symbols of Judaism. Okay, why else would you put a shofar in a grave? So another suggestion is that, as we're going to see at the end, a shofar is part of the story of Mashiach, of Tchiyat HaMetim, right, of the end of days. very appropriate to put it on a grave. Or maybe, and that's probably not true for these first two, but this one on the right is perhaps true. Maybe the person was a Baal Tokea. This is what he did in life. So let's put it on his grave. So we have shofarot in ancient Roman graves. This one is really interesting, right? It's got Greek writing. It's got these very Greek masks, tragedy masks, but it also has Hebrew, shalom. It has a menorah, and it has, not exactly beautiful, but you can make it out, a shofar and a lulav. Okay. Same iconography with a little extra stuff added here. Okay. This is from a Roman burial plaque, 3rd, 4th century. You also have a jar, maybe a jar of oil, maybe a knife for the korbanot, right? All kinds of interesting symbols, but definitely a shofar. And here you have a grave from Germany, I believe, right? Middle Ages, where he's holding the shofar. So we have, it definitely is a Jewish symbol. Okay, moving into modern times. We have the very well-known story of the shofar blowers at the Kotel. Okay, after the 1929 Arab riots in Palestine, the British mandate as a commission of inquiry, and basically what they come out with is let's restrict the Jews, right? And one of the things that they do is that the Kotel, the Arabs say the Jews make so much noise at the Western Wall, which of course is this tiny little place, as you can see here, and we forbid them from making so much noise. And so the British say, okay, no shofar. And interesting, we don't have any conversation about shofar or Rosh Hashanah, but very famously in 1930, a young Chabad Chassid, his name was Moshe Tzvi Segal, said, how can this be? We're not going to shofar at the end of Yom Kippur. And he comes to the Kotel, Eila, and he goes over to Rav Orenstein, who's the chief rabbi of the Jewish quarter. And he says to him, do you have a shofar? He whispers to him, and he's like, don't do that. There's British soldiers everywhere. And he says, do you have a shofar? And he kind of nods over to the side to say, oh, the shofar is over there. And so what does he do? And this is his own testimony. I opened the drawer and slipped the shofar into my shirt. I had the shofar, but what if they saw me before I had a chance to blow it? I was still unmarried at the time. Following the Ashkenazi custom, I did not wear a talit. I turned to the person praying at my side and asked him for his talit. My request must have seemed strange to him, but the Jews are a kind kind people, especially at the holiest moments of the holiest day, and he handed me his talit without a word. I wrapped myself in the talit. At that moment, I felt I had created my own private domain. All around me, a foreign government prevails, ruling over the people of Israel, even on their holiest day and at their holiest place, and we are not free to serve our God. But under this talit is another domain. Here I am under no dominion save that of my Father in heaven. Here I shall do as he commands me, and no force on earth will stop me. And he blows the shofar. Of course, he's immediately arrested. He's brought to the Kishla, the prison in the old city. Rav Kook has to intercede for him. But from then on, every Yom Kippur until partition, right, until the end of 1947, there was a young man who volunteers to blow the shofar, knowing he's going to be arrested. But this is the show of defiance. If you're interested in this story, there's a beautiful short film that was made by a guy named Aryeh Halivni about the shofar blowers, and he interviewed as many as he could find, and it's really something special. Okay, after Israel becomes a state, we take on the shofar as kind of this symbolic thing. So you have these two great pictures. This one is on the left is a parade, a military parade to celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut, the very first Yom Ha'atzmaut, 1949. And this gentleman decided to bring along his shofar and to blow it. For the 10th anniversary of Israel, 1958, a fascinating figure named Shlomo Zanvil Kahana decides at the holiest place. Remember 1958, we don't have the Kotel, we don't have Har HaBayit, we don't have the Old City. What do we have? We have Har Zion. And he establishes all sorts of things on Har Zion. And for the 10th anniversary of the state, he creates this extravaganza on Har Zion, which includes 12 Yemenite shofar blowers who are blowing shofar as the people are coming up to Har Zion. One of them is blowing what he claimed is a 400-year-old shofar. So like this, again, this mix of the old and the new. The most famous modern shofar, of course, is of Shlomo Goren. On the third day of the 6 Day War, Har Habayit Biyadenu, but Rav Goren goes down to the Kotel, right? And that's where he blows the shofar, and that's where he says Shechayanu. And I won't read through the whole thing, but I'm sure many people here have heard the recording, or at least part of the recording, and blowing the shofar. And there's actually a guy who makes and sells shofarot in Tel Aviv who claims that he has Rav Goren's shofar. But we'll just do another three. Three? Yes. Okay, this bizarre thing I came across in looking for pictures of shofars. This is the largest shofar in the world. I don't think it's blowable. It was made by the city of Netanya in 2022 to commemorate the UN vote of partition, and they called it the Liberty Shofar. Um, Perhaps to show, right? You have the pasuk here, "Vayabayamu yitaka b'shofar gadol ba'ovdim beretz Ashur kibbutz galuyot." Shofar is the beginning of the Geulah. 1947 partition is the beginning of the Geulah. I haven't seen it in person. I feel like I have to make a pilgrimage to Netanya to see it because it's crazy. Okay, two last things. The sounds, right? We talked about how the shofar gives you a sense of awesomeness, a sense of majesty, but do the sounds themselves mean something? So there's a fascinating guy in Spot. His name is Avram Lowenthal, and he is a Kabbalist and an artist and a Kabbalistic artist. And he had computer software that analyzes the sound waves of the shofar, and then he paints in kind of inspiration of that. And he has a whole explanation of what are the meanings of the sounds, right? And it mostly is about giving and receiving and brokenness and wholeness, right? And I'll just read this one little part. The very large triangle at the top represents the final, very long sound of Tekiah Gedola. This represents unconditional love and oneness. Each of the 100 sounds corresponds to a particular aspect of our inner consciousness. Each progressive sound represents deeper levels of love and spiritual awareness. And he's created beautiful art based on this idea. And it's really a very interesting combination of very new technology and very old ideas. Okay, and finally, the shofar, we alluded to this in the very beginning, and we allude to it also, don't just allude to it, we quote it in the Machzor Rosh Hashanah. Of course, the very famous pasuk in Yeshayahu, "Vaya bayom hahu yitaka b'shofar gadol, uba'u ha'ovdim be'eretz Ashur v'hanidachim be'eretz Mitzrayim v'ishtachavu Hashem b'har hakodesh b'Yerushalayim." Right? Yeshayahu is talking about kibbutz galuyot, the beginning of the Geula. Geula and its beginnings are connected to Eliyahu, right? Eliyahu at the end of Sefer Malachi, right? He's a mivaser. Hinei anochi sholech lachem et Eliyahu hanavi, right? Lifnei bo yom Hashem hagadol v'hanora. So Eliyahu here in this painting is blowing the shofar, but the shofar and Eliyahu together are really meant to signify Mashiach is on the way, right? We have this pasuk in Yoel, Tiku shofar b'tzion v'hariu b'har kodshi yirgezu kol yoshvei haaretz ki ba yom Hashem ki karov. It's coming, it's getting close. It's not here yet, but it's getting closer. So if you go in the old city to one of the four Sephardic synagogues, the Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai synagogue, and you look up, high up in one of the windows, there is a shelf that has on it a jug with oil and a shofar. Because the tradition is that when Eliyahu Hanavi comes to Yerushalayim, of course, he's going to come to Yerushalayim, he's going to stop at the Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai synagogue to pick up his supplies before he goes to anoint the Mashiach with the oil and to proclaim him with the shofar. It was there pre-1948. The synagogue was desecrated and then it was rebuilt after 67, and they knew that this was there and they put it back. So shofar, many, many, many messages, many different kinds of symbolism. I hope some of them are meaningful to us as we hear the shofar in Elul and on Rosh Hashanah. All right, let's see what things have. Right. The Romans carrying the ark as there was no ark, right? It's not necessarily an ark, by the way. It could be something else, but that is an interesting question. Right. So here we have a whole debate. It could be a shulchan, right? Not so clear. Today on 9/11, many bells were rung. Oh, thank you, Judy. That's very topical and interesting. They rang bells. I also was reading somewhere that there was a woman, rabbi, don't remember where, during COVID, when people would come out on their balconies to applaud the healthcare workers, she would come out and blow shofar. And she did it for like a long, long time. Why lahavdil? Because there's nothing like Yerushalayim. Borough Park is not Yerushalayim. Flatbush is not Yerushalayim. That's the lahavdil. Okay. Oh, the guy who's blowing on his porch. Yeah, maybe, maybe. Oh, your father was about okay. We have a shofar as matzeva. Okay, very nice. So that's proving my theory. Shofar on the gravestones of Leviim. I only know Leviim have the pictures. I do not know anything about shofar on Leviim. I would be happy to learn otherwise. I don't know why it would be, but anyone who has any proof for that, that would be very interesting. Okay, any other thoughts, comments, questions? Okay, so we're heading into Rosh Hashanah. Get yourselves ready. Next week, you're going to take a break from all your cooking. We're going to actually talk about Yom Kippur. We'll be a week ahead of ourselves. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Shulie.
Thank you so much.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you. Besoros
Amen.
tovos.
Amen.
Bring them